Welcome back to Believe in Colts. I'm your host, Lawrence Owen, and today we are going to break down the Indianapolis Colts versus the Houston Texans, week 13 of the 2025 NFL season. And there's a lot of, well, frankly, there's a lot of stories coming out about this game. Mostly injury stories. Some teams getting others back. And then, of course, the big story with the Indianapolis Colts starting quarterback, Daniel Jones. And with that going on, I would like to talk about the injury reports for the most part. A lot of guys on the Houston Texans injury report, and some of them are big names. Will Anderson, right? The prized pass rusher, edge rusher for the Houston Texans, is not practicing due to a chest injury. Curious to see if he's going to be playing or not, because normally you would be practicing at this point, at least limited. He did not even limited. You got Jamal Hill, the linebacker, also has a hamstring, not practicing. Johnny Carter, the cornerback, not practicing. You got limited practices from Danico Autry, who all of us know very, very well. Trent Brown, Blake Fisher, their tackles, limited practices. One has a hand. The other is an illness. I expect Fisher to definitely play since it's just an illness. He'll probably be a full on Friday. Now, Trent Brown, he'll probably play as well with a hand injury. However, the limited practices is a bit questionable. Jalen Petrie and CJ Stroud, both coming back from concussions, both had full practices on Thursday. Stroud had a full practice on Wednesday. Looks like this could be his game back from concussion, and that will be an interesting development as the Houston Texans get their prize quarterback back. Now, as for the Indianapolis Colts, there's been no limited practices on Thursday. Everybody was full practice. Jalen Carlisle is playing full practice. Neville Gallimore, full practice. Sauce Gardner's full practice. And even Daniel Jones. All right. Full practice. And he was, from what I understand, that's where we need to talk. Okay. We absolutely need to discuss Daniel Jones because of the video that come out and the reports that he has a fracture instead of just a lower leg injury. Now they're saying then it turned to fibula injury, and now it's a fracture, and people are freaking out over this. Now, I have done a lot of research. Not only have I personally went through and looked at a lot of videos and looked at what he himself, Daniel Jones, has discussed about this and the head coach. A lot of people are, saying, well, the Colts are just downplaying this injury. And, you can't have a fracture and act like it's no big deal. But after talking to some doctors, some sports doctors about this specific thing, now, obviously, there is a lot of assumptions in this because they don't have the actual, medical report in front of them. But the fact that he is practicing without something on his leg in the first place, the fact that he's practicing shows it's not a broken leg, right? Like everybody would think, like a snapped in half or something. Otherwise he wouldn't be practicing at all. He'd be laid up in bed with a big old cast on his leg. It's not like a hairline fracture or something of that nature, because he would have a bulky leg brace, which in the video he does not have. Most of the doctors that I have talked to say that this is a very common, most likely it is a very common injury, especially in American football, where a piece of bone, a tiny piece of bone, chips off the main bone and it's basically floating. And that is also called a fracture because the piece of bone fractured off the main piece of bone and it's floating around. And from what I understand, it's still very painful. But odds are the chance of having it cause further injury is very slim. And they say lots and lots and lots of players play with this injury and don't even make it on the injury report, because in order for something to hit the injury report, you have to have something, symptoms. You need symptoms such as pain. And sometimes floating bones don't give pain. Sometimes they're very painful, right? Now, Daniel Jones says that he's had this for a little while. He played with it all last week, for sure, he said, right? So that's a situation. He played all last week, and he looked fine when it came to doing his dropbacks and everything. Yes, okay. So he's not taking as many snaps in practice. Well, if he's got a little bit of pain in there, of course he's going to take some off, right? Now, he still had a full practice today, but, just because he's missing a few snaps due to a little bit of pain, that's no big deal to sit here and fret over, in my opinion. I think this is being overblown a ton by media, and because it's being overblown by media, fans are freaking out, okay? Because they just read what the report says and immediately jump to the worst possible conclusion there is. And they're like, oh, they're downplaying it. I don't think it's downplaying. I think you're overplaying, okay? Because if this is that type of injury where people play on this all the time, it's no big deal. We've had guys do that all throughout their careers. Carson Wentz, had this, right? With a piece of bone that had broke off in his foot, if I remember correctly, right? Now, he went and had surgery on it, to get that corrected right away, whoever that was. Or was it? No. Actually, I think it was no, I think it was Quentin Nelson that had that. It's been a few years ago, so you got to forgive me if my memory is not 100% on right now. But either way, generally it's something that if they do have surgery, they wait until the off season to have that done, because they could still play with that type of injury. And then they try to get back into the shape and ready to start the next season. So you could absolutely play with something like that. All right. If that is what it is, and that's what the consensus assumption is, because of the video and because of the reports and the things that have been said about the injury by the coaches and by Daniel Jones himself in interviews. So I'm not overly worried about it. I don't think anyone should be overly worried about it. It's not like it's going to increase the chance of the defense, clocking him and sacking him and him ended up, breaking his leg in half or something. Okay. That's not what it sounds like at all. If there was an increased chance of that happening, they probably would not play him. You got to think about that. All right. So with that being said, let's actually break down the game, okay? Because that, in my opinion, is what's really big, okay? What we actually need to talk about. And I'll be honest. This is a very important game. It's the first time that these two teams are playing each other. They're 6-5. We're 8-3, right? They're making a push to try to make the playoffs. We're trying to stem the bleeding from losing 2 out of the last 3. Granted, it was a month-long freaking road games, right? Month-long road games. We haven't played at home in a month. So this could be a huge benefit of actually being at home. The Colts are undefeated at home. So we'll see how that works out. There are some things we need to keep an eye on, though. Mainly their defense. Their defense is very, very good. And everybody knows this. And it's what I want to talk about. Look, when it comes to the Houston Texans overall, this is no joke of a team. They have the number 2 ranked scoring defense in football. The number 1 ranked yardage defense in football. I mean, when you look at their defense, they're top 10 across the board in just about everything. Okay. Turnover percentage, they're 4th best in the NFL. Okay. When it comes to Passing, right? They have the third most interceptions. They've given up the second least touchdowns. They've given up the third least yardage. Passing. The thing that they're kind of mediocre at is rush defense. They're 13th in the NFL in yards per attempt allowed, and they're 12th in the NFL in rushing touchdowns allowed. Well, that sounds like a lot of good stuff for the Colts, right? The weakness of this defense is where the Colts probably want to focus their offense on. Now, granted, they could just drop guys in the box and send run blitzes like a lot of teams have lately. Correct? Absolutely. Now, the issue with that is the Texans don't really blitz naturally a lot. Not like the last three teams we played where the last three teams we played are top 10 blitz teams. Mostly top 5 blitz teams. Whereas the Texans blitz less than 22%. Okay? As a matter of fact, they blitz about almost exactly the same amount as Lou Anarumo's Colts defense does. Now, could they change that for this game? They absolutely could. And they probably should since, it has shown success against our offense. However, they don't like doing that. They like to try to get pressure with their front four. Well, let's see what happens. Let's see. Some guys on this team that obviously we need to keep an eye on. Defensively, they've got some really good players. Offensively, they've got some really good players. But Daniel Jones, last week, the Colts played a lot of max protect because the Chiefs love to blitz. And that's why they played a lot of max protect. And it worked for 3 quarters until the defense got too tired, right? And then it failed because the Colts, after 3 quarters, offensively just could not get a first down for nothing. Their last 4 drives, 3 and outs. And it wore our defense out. So the Colts have to find a way to maintain drives. And against Will Anderson and Daniel Hunter, that's going to be tough because they also got some other guys out there like Derek Stingley, right? Very good. Jalen Petrie, who may or may not play, probably will. He's also a very good safety. CJ Gardner-Johnson is out there as well. You got to remember, this team has some good players on this team. But we finally get to play against our former EJ Speed, right? He has started 6 games, played in all of them, and has 1 pass defense and 43 tackles. Curious, I haven't looked at their advanced defense. Let me get a look at that. I haven't looked at the advanced defensive stats yet. Let me look at where that's at. Looking for EJ Speed. I'm just curious what his missed tackle percentage is here. 10.4. Actually gotten a little bit better than what he was with the Colts. 10.4% missed tackle. Still too high for a linebacker, though. All right, you don't want to be over 10. But Henry Toa has a 20% missed tackle percentage. And he's their other linebacker, right? Him and EJ Speed. So we got a good chance of really doing a lot with this game. Jonathan Taylor could literally have a breakout game in this game against this linebacker and that second level of defense. So we got to keep an eye on that. Hopefully we could start running early, have some success, 3-4 plus yards a carry, and then continue to run the football against this team. Because the secondary, like I said, very, very good. One of the best in the NFL. They're actually pretty darn scary when it comes to that. They have some of, if not the best I've seen in a while. I mean, them and the Broncos are pretty much dead even. Um, when it comes to passing, they've given up the second least passing touchdowns, so third least passing yards, and they have the third most interceptions with 12 on the season. All right. Net air yards per pass, give up the second least. All right. They're not a team to mess around with when it comes to passing the football. Now, could the Colts legitimately do a good job with this? Yes, especially if the Colts continue to run that heavy package of 12 and 13 personnel, having 2 or 3 tight ends on the field at a time. I know it worked well, like I said, last week against the Chiefs. I think it would work much, much better against this week against the Texans because their linebackers ain't even as good as the Texans linebackers. Because not only can we run the ball against them and force missed tackles, but also, coverage. I'll take our tight ends over their tight ends every day of the week. Okay. That's something that you really need to keep an eye on. Now, this game, to me, I feel like, my goodness, you got to have some hot reads mixed in with your offensive packages. You got to have some more like screens and leak routes. You used to leak your tight ends all the time, and Daniel Jones would find them and they get big yards. Why don't we see that more often? Okay. Rather than keeping them in to protect, which I get, your quarterback is hurting a little bit in the leg or a lot. I'm not 100% sure. Probably either way, he's got an injury, he's got a leg injury, and you're wanting to protect him. That's probably why they ran a lot of that max protect in the Kansas City game. But sometimes the best way to protect your quarterback is allow him to get that football out quickly, right? And a quick leak or a screen game, so that he doesn't get hit. Why wouldn't that work? That'd be great. And we got some of the best blockers in football when it comes to the screen game. Our tight ends and our wide receivers are great at blocking. We have some of the best pulling offensive linemen in football. We need to run more screens. Why are we only running a max 3 screens a game? Let's get some more of that against this Texans team. This will be interesting. I really hope that the Colts could come out at home and win. Now, that being said, the Colts historically have not played against the Texans at home well. Usually they play really good at NRG Stadium down in Texas, but they haven't been playing very well at home against the Texans. This isn't your typical Indianapolis Colts team. They haven't came out. They've played much different than what we've seen in years past. So I feel like the Colts offensively just need to sustain some drives and get points where you can. Don't have a drive that ends at the 30 or 25 and it's like 4th and 2 or 4th and 3 and go for it. Take the field goal where you can. Okay? Take your points. Always. You're going to need as many points, whatever points, that you could get to win this game. Because this game could legitimately be a 12 to 15 game, or 15-17 game. You got to take the points where you can. Now, granted, if it's a 50-plus yard field goal and it's like 4th and 2, go for it. Okay? Because Badgley's not really good at 50-plus yards. Either go for it or punt. Either way. But obviously, most likely, if it's a 51-yard field goal or something, you're probably going to go for it on 4th and 1, 4th and 2, rather than punt. So I would do that. Now, offensively, the Houston Texans have got a team, dude. They've got a really good offense, and we got to pay attention. Mainly passing the football. Running the football, they're not like die-hard great team, okay? Offensively, passing the football, they're 16th in the NFL in passing yards and 19th in the NFL in touchdowns offensively. They've given up 6 interceptions. They've given the ball away 6 times through the air. Rushing, they're 23rd in the NFL in total yards, 27th rushing touchdowns, and 21st in yards per attempt. Offensively, they haven't been the same team that we've seen the last 2 years. Okay. I feel like our defense could really do something here. Now, they still have really good football players on their team, obviously. But look, they've got Nick Chubb out there running his butt off. They got Dameon Pierce, who comes in occasionally, right? And Chubb is not the same Chubb that we've seen in years past with the Browns. You know, he's only averaging 4.1 yards a carry right now. Not the best in the world. Granted, our run defense at times is as porous as Swiss cheese, but at other times when it matters, it seems like they're able to lock down and get stops. So we'll see how that ends up turning out. But passing, like I said, they're not great passing right now either. You know, actually, I would say Davis Mills has been much better than CJ Stroud. So, I mean, not necessarily QBR or rating, but you take the 3 games that Davis Mills has played, and he's got 5 touchdowns to 1 interception, you know, and he's got 879 yards. CJ Stroud, for his 8 games that he started, is 11 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Right? And 1,700 yards. Davis Mills has produced more than what CJ Stroud has. So, and they're both getting sacked like crazy. All right. There's already 25 sacks between them. Now the Colts have more sack. The Colts right now defensively are one of the best pressure teams in the NFL. Defensively, sack teams in the NFL. Like I said, they're bottom half of the NFL when it comes to blitzing. So it's their front fours getting there and doing their job. Okay. But we still mix in blitzes occasionally. Like I said, we're like 22nd in the NFL when it comes to blitzing. Same with the Texans. We're right neck and neck. Okay. We don't get as much pressure and sacks as the Texas defense do, but I think we were going to have more than enough to handle this offense. As long as they're not on the field for 43 freaking minutes. So as long as the offense can stay on the field, keep the defense healthy and fresh, I feel like that this defense could hold the Texans down to less than 2 touchdowns. 2 touchdowns or less in this game. As long as the offense can move the football. That being said, I think it's time for a prediction. All right. I feel like this is a game that's not going to be super high scoring. This is not a game that the Colts are going to blow 38 points on. Okay. I feel like this is a game that the Colts still have to score more than 20. Okay. This is the year that the Colts lose games if they score 20 or less points, because literally all 3 of their games, they've scored 20 points. All 3 of the games that they have lost are the only 3 games that they've scored 20 points. So the Colts have to score at least 20, in my opinion, to win this game. Now, obviously that's not the case, but that's just an interesting stat to bring out, you know, and discuss. Look, I think the Colts win this game. I think they win it in a tight, low-scoring game. overall. I think Indianapolis is able to fend off this defense enough to put at least 4 field goals and probably a touchdown. All right. On this defense, and our defense, I feel like, has the ability, like I said, to hold this offense down to 2 touchdowns or less. I think the Colts win this game 19-13. Said low scoring game. But I still feel like the Indianapolis Colts could pull this off. I have no worries with Daniel Jones. None. All right. As long as we can get the ball out of his hands fairly quickly. Well, that's my analysis, my breakdown, and my prediction. Let me know yours in the comments. If you're here on YouTube, please smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, tag that notification bell so that you are notified next time I go live or upload a video. And if you're listening to this on an audio podcast, please rate and review, as that helps get this out to more people. And a real quick shout out. Hey, I know I didn't put out my all 22 this week. I apologize for that. However, my wife was hospitalized with pneumonia, and then she got diagnosed with COPD and emphysema. And that's why she has been admitted to the hospital and has been there for the last few days. I'm just home right now to get this out in my opinions on the game. So thank you so much for your patience and understanding. And until next time, I'm Lawrence Owen. This was Believe in Colts, brought to you by Bet Online. And as usual, go Colts.
Do you believe?